Hello, this is Wedding Talk Q&A with Pastor Garth, and we're here to answer some questions. I've been doing weddings now for quite a number of years, and these are some of the common questions that I hear when I meet with brides and grooms. Everybody knows what communion is. It's when Christ took the bread and the wine and said, "This represents my body and my blood that I'm prepared to break and shed for you in this new covenant agreement." When it comes to a wedding ceremony, I like to do it right after the signing ceremony. Right after we sign the license, you would come back, and I only serve the bride and the groom, and it would be their first meal together as husband and wife. And let me just say, this is an optional thing, so you don't have to have it. It's something that you can have if you want. But I take a couple of minutes and I teach on the origin. Everybody knows what communion is, but they don't really know why did Jesus do what he did on that day. And it dates back to Old Testament times when families would enter into covenant agreements with one another. It was like an early form of insurance. And so the households, the two families would say, "I've got your back, you've got my back." And they would go through a number of ceremonies to ratify that covenant. The first thing they would do is they would exchange jackets, signifying, "My jacket is always going to dwell in your household. So if you have a bad year, your barns are empty, you can come and sit at my table and eat from my table because we're in covenant with one another." Another thing they would do is they would exchange swords, signifying that my sword will always dwell in your household. So if somebody comes and attacks you, I'll be there along with the life of my sons, ready to lay them down for your household because we're in covenant with one another. The next thing they would do is they would add each other's name to their own so that everybody would know who they're in covenant with. So if somebody had a bright idea, "Hey, let's go get that Smith guy," well, it's not Smith any longer, it's Smith & Wesson. And so you have to figure out, well, who is this Wesson guy? Because if you're messing with Smith, you're messing with Wesson. And one of the other things they would do is they would exchange rings. And rings represent authority. Back in those days, it was like a signet ring where you could actually take and push it into the wax, and that was your signature. And so when you give somebody a ring, it represents that you're giving them authority over who you are. And so they would exchange rings. And the last thing they would do is they would sit down and have that covenant meal. They bring out the bread, they bring out the wine and say, "This is our body and blood that we're prepared to break and shed for each other in this new covenant agreement." And that's what Christ was doing on that day. He was doing the final act of covenant that God had established with the house of Abraham all those years before. And if you stop and think about it, marriage is very much a covenant agreement. What's mine is yours, what's yours is mine. Even the exchange of names and the exchange of rings is all part of the covenant. So this would be a covenant meal between the bride and groom that would represent their body, their blood, that they're prepared to break and shed for each other in this new marriage, in this new covenant agreement. Of course, like I said at the start, it's only an option, and I would take a few minutes and explain it just like I've explained it here so your guests would know exactly what you were doing.